Hi everyone, Sons of Liberty here. We're so excited to play for you all and honored to be part of the 250th anniversary of the Battle of Cowpens. While we're very sad that we're not able to play for you all face to face like we have in the past, we're most happy to present this short program to celebrate this momentous occasion. So today we'd like to bring you closer to your heritage by playing you the songs of our beginnings as Americans. This music was heard by our founding fathers, sung by the Continental and British armies, and played by the frontiersmen like the Over-Mountain Men who contributed greatly to the victory of Cowpens. A popular march at the time of the American Revolution for both the British and American armies, and has now become a popular march tune as well as the official march of the United States 7th Cavalry. Right, so now we're going to play some sea chanties, and these were popular tunes to dance to, sing to, and basically do anything to in the 18th century, and they were primarily used by sailors to keep time when loading and unloading ships. So you can see how they'd be useful in marching as well. So the ones we're going to do for you are A Roving, The Trooper Watering His Nag, and Maggie Lauder, and these are all popular English and Scottish tunes at the time of the American Revolution. 19th, 1777, Thomas Hughes, who was a British officer under General Burgoyne, was captured by the Americans during the Battle of Saratoga and imprisoned in Philadelphia. Now, 2 years later, in his January 28th journal entry, Hughes noted this.
Our most disagreeable attendant is the noise of the rebel soldiers who vociferate their songs so loudly that the whole house rings with War on Washington. A favorite ballad.
Now, this ballad, War in Washington, was yet another adaptation of the British tune, the British Grenadiers, and that was originally written by Jonathan Mitchell Sewall. Now, many additional verses were added to this tune by both the British and the Americans throughout its rather long and illustrious history. The British Grenadiers speaks of the British elite fighting force known as the Grenadiers, and War in Washington of the shameful British occupation of Philadelphia, which George Washington fortunately turned into more of a siege. Now, what we're going to do is to show you the complete difference between these two sets of lyrics to the very same tune, is we're going to play you some of the verses of both the British tune, the British Grenadiers, and the American song, War in Washington. So we hope you all enjoy.
To slay their foes withal, but all big boys do know it, and by their show their fears. The toe, row, the British Grenadiers. Their dark and fathomed councils, our weakest heads defeat. Our children mount their armies, our boats destroy their fleet, and to complete the dire disgrace cooped up within the town, they live the scorn of all our host, the slave of Washington. And when the siege is over, we to the town repair. The townsmen cry, hurrah, boys! Here comes the Grenadier. Here come the Grenadiers, my boys, who know no doubts or fears. Then sing, to row to the British Grenadiers. Shall view with terror and haughty Spain revere, while every warlike nation would court alliance here. And George, his minions trembling round, dismounting from his throne, pay homage to America and glorious Washington. That one up with another ballad that was written about the same time, this one in the winter of 1777. And it's about the British blockade of Chesapeake Bay outside Philadelphia. Now, that was a very serious thing for the American Army because they had no navy to speak of which could break the blockade. And so, as usual, they came up with something ingenious to achieve the same effect. The plan was to take several hundred kegs filled with gunpowder, float them down the river into the British fleet. And these kegs were fixed with a mechanism that would somehow detonate the charge upon impact with the hull of a British vessel. The problem was that it was wintertime, and so there was a lot of ice in the river, and so the kegs weren't blowing up against the hulls of British vessels as they were intended to, and they were just blowing up against all the ice floes in the middle of the river across the entire expanse, and that caused very little damage to the British fleet. However, it seriously damaged the British soldiers' morale, especially when it was rumored that these kegs blowing up across the river were actually filled with American soldiers. General Howe, the commander of the British forces in Philadelphia, was rumored to be too afraid to leave the arms of his mistress throughout the entire event. But he was obviously not too afraid to dash off a letter to London immediately afterward, commending the bravery of his command throughout the entire attack. So this song was written a year later in 1778 by the great American satirist Francis Hopkinson, and it's basically to mock the British Army and their gallant actions during their whole engagement with the floating wreckage. So I hope you all enjoy as we recreate Francis Hopkinson's satire through the Battle of the Kegs. Gallants attend and hear a friend show forth harmonious ditty. Strange things I'll tell the late befell in Philadelphia city. 'Twas early day, as poets say, when just the sun was rising. The soldier stood along a wood and saw a sight surprising. As in a maze he stood to gaze, the truth can't be denied, sirs. He spied a score of kegs or more go floating down the tide, sirs. A sailor too in jerkin blue the strange appearance viewing, first damned his eyes in great surprise, then said, "There's mischief brewing. The kegs now all the rebel bound, packed up like pickled herring, and they've come down to attack the town in this new way of sailing." The soldier flew the sailor too, and scared almost to death, sirs, tore out their shoes to spread the news, and ran till out of breath, sirs. The motley crew in vessels new, waiting for their guide, sir, packed up in bags of wooden kegs, come driving down the tide, sir. Therefore prepare for bloody war, those kegs must so be routed, or surely we despised shall be, and British courage doubted. The kegs to send are strongly made of rebel staves and hoops, sirs, could not oppose the powerful foes, the conquering British troops, sirs. Till night, these men of might displayed amazing courage, and when the sun was fairly down, returned to sup their porridge. 100 men with each a pen or more, upon my word, sirs, it is most true would be too few that valor to record, sirs. Such feats did they perform that day upon those wicked kegs, sirs, that years to come, if they get home, they'll make their boasts and brags, sirs. Thank you very much. Right. So now we're going to move on to a very much more refined section of the music of the 18th century. Dan, would you like to take us through that? Absolutely. So, kind of like now, there are a couple classes of people. There's the working class, and then there's the gentry. What they called that in the 18th century is the gentry. Those are the people who are at the top tier of society, and they, of course, have a different kind of music than the rest of us poor people. And so far we've been playing music of the common people. Right now we're going to play you music of the gentry. There are a couple different styles. There's of course the classical music of the period, but then there's also a more common gentry music that we want to focus on, and it takes the form of the English country dance. This was very popular among the upper middle class and the gentry. Something they could have fun dancing to, but would still be refined enough to make sense in their social position. So the one we want to play for you tonight is called Ramsgate Assembly, and it was written about the resort town of Ramsgate in the north of England. There was a great dance hall there that could be rented out for private events or usually for social political occasions, and this music often took on a social or political message. So Ramsgate Assembly.
So now we're going to play a tune that is a favorite among us and was also shared with one of our great founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson. This song is a Scotch tune called Flowers of Edinburgh. It has a personal connection to Jefferson, which I'll share with you if you don't mind. So, Thomas Jefferson's wife, Martha, was previously married before she married Jefferson, but that was only for a short time, and then her first husband died. Now, his death left her not only one of the most eligible, but also one of the most fabulously wealthy young ladies in the entire community. And that meant, as did most things at the time, that any young man of good enough family had decided to court her as soon as the time for mourning her husband had reasonably passed. So, Jefferson was one day riding by her house with his fiddle on his way to a dinner party, and we know from Jefferson's letters that at that time he basically took his violin with him everywhere. So anyway, he was passing by her house, and he heard the sound of her playing a harpsichord. And, of course, at the time of the 18th century, music meant joy and jollification. And so he assumed, and fortunately for him correctly, that the time for mourning her husband had passed. And so he forgot conveniently about all of his earlier plans and then entered the house with his fiddle. So some hours later, two other young gentlemen with the very same intentions were passing the same way, and upon stopping at the house, they heard the sound of, quote, Mr. Jefferson playing upon the violin and Mrs. Jefferson accompanying him on the harpsichord. And so the one turned to the other without another word and said, Curses! Jefferson has been here before us. And they mounted back up and left the very same instant. Now the person who said those words and then afterwards recorded this instant was Patrick Henry. So we know what Thomas Jefferson was up against. Well, so The Flowers of Edinburgh is the tune that they were rumored to have played, and Thomas Jefferson naturally became very fond of this tune and was known to hum it or play it or sing it often. So now we're going to play for you The Flowers of Edinburgh. So now we're going to play you a song that was beloved by us and also by a lot of the upper class of the 18th century. So, Daniel, would you like to take it?
Yes, absolutely.
So we talked a minute ago about how the gentry enjoyed both the English country dance and that style of a little more relaxed, elevated music. And then we also said that they enjoyed classical music of the period. So we're going to play you just a little short selection of something that I think a lot of people back in the 18th century probably would have enjoyed. We know that Thomas Jefferson, as we mentioned earlier, was an avid music collector, and he played violin, cello, and was fascinated with the workings of the piano. He also collected a ton of music. And this piece was in his collection. It's a piece by Boccherini called La Musica Notturna della Strada di Madrid. And that title in English simply means a little night music from a street in Madrid. And this piece was designed to reflect what a tourist would see in Madrid during an evening. And this movement that we want to play for you, the last movement of the song, presents the song of street musicians outside a cafe in Madrid. And so the instructions that Boccherini left in his score were for the cellist to do something rather unorthodox for the period and even now today that they ought to do. And even now, some cellists still refuse to play this music in the style that Boccherini intended it. However, we are going to keep up the tradition, and as avid fans of history, we're going to do it the way Boccherini wrote it. So we hope you all enjoy La Musica Notturna de l'Estrada de Madrid, Movement 3. And just as a footnote to all that, we'd also like to mention that this piece was featured in a film that's very loved by us, Master and Commander, starring Russell Crowe and Paul Bettany. It's actually played at the end of the film, and so you'll find it in there as well. So I don't think any celebration of 18th century music would be complete without us inserting a non-period tune. And that tune, namely, would be the Gale. It's a familiar and popular tune from the movie The Last Mohicans. It's a movie that's loved by all of us reenactors, and I'm sure many of you watching. So it's been our pleasure to play this tune a lot, and when we're around the fire, just kind of hanging out and enjoying a good time with our music, it really brings home the spirit of the frontier and the struggles that the pioneers face. So if you'll allow us to step out of period for a moment, we're going to play for you now, the Gale. so now we're going to go back into the period and play you an exciting new medley we just came up with of 3 French and Irish tunes. And this one we had originally intended to perform for you all in person, pretty much for the first time at the Cowpens anniversary. But since we can't do that, we're still going to give you a shot of it right now. We did 3 tunes in this one. The first one's Shins Around the Fire, which the title of that really bears no explanation. If you've spent any time around a campfire, as we have, you'll know that when you're most trying to get warm, what ends up getting warm is not your feet, which you're trying to get warm, or your hands, which you wish you could get warm. It's your shins, which you don't even want to get warm, and it basically burns them off.
So anyway, that right now.
So that's Shins Around the Fire. The second one we play is La Belle Catherine, which is a really exciting French marching tune, which you'll find in a lot of fife books from the period. And then the last tune we do is another French tune, which is basically the unofficial anthem of French Quebec. It's called Lavastronia, and interestingly enough, it tells the story of an old man who decides he is always as young as he once was, and so he goes to a dance, picks out the prettiest young lady he can find, and decides to dance with her. Except he soon realizes that he can't quite keep up because he has corns in his feet, so it doesn't really go well. So anyway, Shins Around the Fire, La Belle Catherine, Lavastronia. with Over the Hills and Far Away. This is by far our favorite song to perform at reenactments. And it's been a favorite among many who have been close to us over the years throughout our entire experience of playing at reenactments. And some of you down at Cowpens too, I'm sure, will enjoy hearing this one again. For those of you who don't remember this song, Over the Hills and Far Away began in 1706 as the theme song for a play called The Recruiting Officer. It also served as a subtle advertisement to get soldiers to join Queen Anne's War, which is going on at the time this song was written. It portrays the false hopes and joys of Army life, as well as having a short, catchy chorus. Wherever you are, if you think you can get the lyrics, please feel free to sing along as we play Over the Hills and Far Away.
Drums beat up again for all true soldier gentlemen. Then let us list and march, I say, over the hills and far away, over the hills and o'er the main, to Flanders, Portugal, and Spain. Queen Anne commands and we'll obey, over the hills and far away. The constables, they search about to find such brisk young fellows out. Then let us be volunteers, I say, over the hills and far away, over the hills and o'er the main, to Flanders, Portugal, and Spain. Queen Anne commands and we'll obey, over the hills and far away. Hear that, brave boys, and let us go, or else we shall be pressed, you know. Then let us list and enter pay, over the hills and far away, over the hills and o'er the main, to Flanders, Portugal, and Spain. Queen Anne commands and we'll obey, over the hills and far away. Tom, he may refuse to wipe his angry master's shoes, for then he's free to sing and play, over the hills and far away, over the hills and o'er the main, to Flanders, Portugal, and Spain. Queen Anne commands and we'll obey, over the hills and far away. We go that we may lead more happy lives, by getting rid of brats and wives, who scull on both all night and day, over the hills and far away, over the hills and o'er the main, to Flanders, Portugal, and Spain. Queen Anne commands and we'll obey, over the hills and far away. For we go, 'tis 1 to 10. We shall return, all gentlemen as well as they, over the hills and far away, over the hills and o'er the main, to Flanders, Portugal, and Spain. Queen and commands, and we'll obey. Over the hills and far away.
Thank you all so much for joining us. We had the best of time performing this for you all. And wherever you are watching, we just hope that you have a very safe and enjoyable Cowpens 250th anniversary celebration. Godspeed.